The crystalline spires of Xylo's prime pierced the perpetual twilight of the stellar nursery, their luminescence casting long, shifting shadows across the obsidian council chamber. The air, filtered through the immense, resonating biofilters, hummed with the low, almost subsonic thrum of the gathered high sovereigns of the Viridian hegemony. They were beings of ancient, stratified intellect, their forms vaguely insected but draped in robes woven from solidified starlight, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the anxiety currently gripping the political core of their thousand-world dominion. Across the vast, polished floor, the projection shimmered, a depiction of the small, unremarkable blue-green sphere designated Sol 3, and the nascent interstellar craft of the species that called itself humanity. High Sovereign Kalen, whose tenure spanned the consolidation of 3 galactic sectors, shifted infinitesimally on his articulated throne. The movement caused a faint cascade of prismatic light to ripple across his carapace. His voice, when it finally cut the silence, was a dry whisper amplified by the chamber's acoustics to a decree of immense weight. The reports remain inconclusive. Their technological signature is erratic, their trajectory illogical, and their diplomatic overtures, when they deign to offer them, are characterized by a baffling simplicity that borders on deliberate insult. They arrived utilizing salvaged propulsion matrices derived from scrap hulls of species long consigned to the galactic periphery. Yet they crossed the void between recognized stellar nurseries with efficiency we cannot replicate even with focused quantum tunneling arrays. Explain this asymmetry, Minister of Intelligence, before the patience of the hegemony fractures further. Minister Thuron leaned forward, his numerous slender limbs trembling slightly, a sign of profound intellectual distress among his caste. The data streams detailing the human arrival were displayed around the central holographic display, a mosaic of improbable energy spikes, inefficient use of known physics, and astonishingly resilient structural integrity in their primary exploratory vessel, the Endeavor. Great Kalen, the asymmetry is the crux of the problem. Their propulsion, as you noted, appears cobbled together from derelict drive components, materials we would filter into molecular dust during standard recycling protocols. They utilized phased plasma conduits that, by all established metrics, should have ruptured under the sheer stress of sustained hyperspace transition. Yet, the vessel endured. More perplexing still, their energy profile is characterized by chaotic bursts of near-perfect efficiency, interspersed with prolonged periods of almost total energy dormancy, as if they are conserving power through sheer, calculated stillness. It defies the principles of continuous thermodynamic optimization that underpin all advanced engineering. A different voice, sharper, emanating from the sovereignty of the Outer Rim, challenged this assessment. Sovereign Lyra, known for her ruthlessness in resource acquisition, projected her image with a harsh, violet light. Inconclusive data is failure, Thuron. Are they a threat, or merely a biological curiosity utilizing unforeseen gravitational variances? We have invested millennia into the stability of the Grand Concordat. We do not tolerate variables with the potential for destructive interference. Their demands were minimal, a trade agreement for certain inert isotopic compounds, but their inherent unpredictability makes negotiation a gamble. They sent 3 delegates, 3 biological entities in primitive, pressurized exoskeletons, projecting an aura of utter, unnerving calm amidst the technological spectacle of our central nexus. They did not seek audience in the diplomatic spire. They insisted on meeting within the engineering core near the primary fusion containment rings. Why? The question hung heavy, charged with the deep-seated Viridian belief that technology dictated hierarchy. To prioritize the mechanics over the meta-narrative of power was alien to their experience. The hegemony ruled through the precise management of energetic flows and the mastery of spacetime manipulation. The how was always more important than the what. Their response to our preliminary telemetry scans was equally confounding, Thuron continued, his tone growing strained. When our passive observation satellites detected anomalous structural resonance within their primary vessel, a frequency pattern consistent with imminent catastrophic failure, they did not engage internal dampeners or reroute power. They broadcast a single, short sequence of modulated electromagnetic waves. It was not a warning nor a plea. It was a mathematical constant, expressed in a prime number sequence we recognized, followed by a complex, utterly novel encoding that defied immediate decryption. It was, effectively, a statement of ontological certainty. In the face of statistical improbability, They knew their structure would hold, despite all evidence suggesting otherwise. The silence that followed this revelation was deeper, heavier, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic pulse of the planet's geosynchronous defense grid. The humans were not merely less advanced. They operated under a different set of fundamental assumptions about the universe. They seemed to treat entropy not as an adversary to be perpetually held back, but as a factor to be temporarily ignored through sheer, focused will. Kalen addressed the observation point on the central holo display, zooming in on the single, solitary vessel that had pierced the outer defenses of the hegemony's controlled space, the Dauntless. It was a vessel of brutalist design, angular and dark, seemingly constructed from welded plates of unremarkable, dull gray material. It lacked the elegant energy sheens, the subtle anti-gravitic shaping, or the integrated aesthetic complexity that defined hegemony starcraft. It looked to the highly refined sensibilities of the Council, like a crude weapon salvaged from a forgotten, barbaric age. "They gave us scrap," Kalen murmured, the phrase echoing with a lifetime of accrued understanding of galactic infrastructure. They approached the pinnacle of organized civilization in a construct seemingly built from the discarded refuse of lesser species. This suggests either profound arrogance or profound ignorance. Which narrative supports their continued survival? Sovereign Lyra offered a chilling possibility. Perhaps, Kalen, they perceive our sophistication as a weakness. If they are so confident in their crude means to cross the void, perhaps they believe our reliance on complex, integrated systems leaves us vulnerable to simple, targeted disruption. A single, precise application of a rudimentary kinetic force could shatter the refined energy matrix supporting a hegemony cruiser. They may be testing our fragility. The philosophical undercurrent of the debate centered on the Viridian concept of ethel, the perfected path of technological ascension. To abandon elegance for brute function was anathema. Humanity, it seemed, had bypassed the need for elegance entirely, substituting it with an unknown variable. "The delegates are en route to the designated negotiation chamber," Thuron reported, data flickering across his carapace. "Security protocols have been maximized. Their atmospheric suits are non-standard. They utilize a pressurized, inert nitrogen-argon mix, which suggests they are adapted to environments radically different from standard Class M or Class L worlds. Their physiology is highly mutable, requiring significant external support just to interface with our controlled environments. They are, by all measures, fragile organisms encased in necessary armor." Kalen inclined his head, acknowledging the assessment of physical vulnerability, but his internal calculation remained unresolved. Fragility, when coupled with such audacious intrusion, often masked a deeper, more resilient nature. "Let the negotiation proceed. Observer teams will maintain absolute neutrality, recording all interactions without intervention. We seek understanding, not confrontation, unless confrontation becomes the only logical recourse for the preservation of the Concordat. Let us see what these, humans, believe they can offer in exchange for the isotopic elements they covet." The sheer scale of the chamber seemed to shrink, focusing all the accumulated political weight of the hegemony onto the upcoming interaction, the first true, direct engagement with a species that defied every known law of ascension. The negotiation chamber 3 of Xylos Prime was designed to intimidate through scale and the subtle manipulation of perceptual reality. The ceiling soared 3 kilometers high, seemingly dissolving into the atmosphere above. The air itself was scented with rare bioluminescent spores, intended to induce a state of receptive calm in visiting dignitaries. When the human delegation entered, escorted by silent, towering Xylosian security constructs, the effect was immediate and jarring. The human delegates were designated in the preliminary briefs only by alphanumeric identifiers: Commander Eva Rostova, Chief Engineer Jian Li, and Diplomatic Liaison Dr. Aris Thorne. They moved with a deliberate, almost slow pace, their environmental suits dull gray, utterly lacking the reflective sheen or articulated ornamentation common among interstellar diplomats. They did not appear overwhelmed by the grandeur. Rather, they seemed to observe it with the detached curiosity of an entomologist examining a particularly complex specimen. Rostova, the presumed leader, stood slightly ahead. Her helmet visor, an opaque black composite, revealed nothing of the internal environment or the organic structure beneath. She held no visible sidearms, carried no data pads, and made no overt display of deference to the hegemony observers situated in the upper galleries. Dr. Thorne initiated the exchange, his voice modulated through the suit's external speaker system. A flat, slightly metallic baritone devoid of the subtle tonal shifts Veridian languages relied upon for emotional nuance. Sovereigns of the hegemony, we thank you for granting this audience. We are prepared to present our proposal for the exchange of inert heavy isotopes for access to your localized, high-yield material refinement methodologies. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Humans, whose origins were barely a galactic breath ago, were requesting advanced refinement techniques while offering raw materials that the hegemony considered necessary only for tertiary construction projects. Kalen, speaking directly through a focused acoustic beam directed at the delegation floor, his voice resonant and demanding precision, replied, "Humans, your proposal presupposes a parity of value that does not exist in our current assessment. The isotopes you offer are plentiful in your local cluster, utilized primarily as shielding filler in sublight exploration craft. Our refinement techniques, conversely, represent the culmination of 7 millennia of dedicated study in temporal phase manipulation of atomic bonding. Why should we trade mastery for raw material?" Jian Li, the chief engineer, stepped forward. This was unexpected. Engineering specialization rarely superseded diplomatic hierarchy in formal address. His voice was measured, almost academic. "Sovereign Kalen, your assessment of the isotopes' utility is accurate within the parameters of established hegemony engineering doctrine. However, we do not seek your refinement methodology for standard application. We seek the knowledge necessary to process these materials into a structure capable of withstanding specific, targeted quantum shear forces, which your current refinement architecture is designed to avoid inducing." This statement introduced the first layer of true complexity. The humans were not seeking technology to replicate existing systems. They were seeking the knowledge required to intentionally stress materials in ways the Veridian hegemony deemed fundamentally destructive or impossible. "You speak of inducing failure," Lyra interjected sharply from the high gallery, her violet light intensifying. "Why would any rational species intentionally destabilize atomic structures?" Dr. Thorne turned slightly toward the unseen Lyra, a gesture of direct, if restrained, engagement. "Rationality is predicated on objective reality, Sovereign. Our reality, the one we inhabit and which we seek to engage with, possesses properties your established doctrine appears to filter out or dismiss as anomalous noise. The materials we desire to create require a structural lattice integrity, achieved only through precise, rapid oscillation across the Planck threshold, a process which necessitates the very precise atomic alignment your high-yield refinement achieves through temporal modulation." The council chamber was filled with barely suppressed confusion. The hegemony understood energy manipulation, gravitational lensing, and space-time weaving. They did not understand intentional, controlled violation of fundamental quantum stability thresholds. Rostova finally spoke, her voice cutting through the technical debate with the authority of immediate command. "Sovereigns, we understand the imbalance perceived in this exchange. We offer materials of low utility to your current infrastructure in exchange for knowledge critical to our immediate existential requirement. We recognize this deficit. Therefore, we offer compensation beyond the immediate isotopic value." Kalen felt a tightening in his primary processing centers. This was the pivot point. Compensation? What value could a species operating with such primitive efficiency offer the hegemony? Rostova slowly raised one hand, pointing toward the holographic projection of the Dauntless, still orbiting silently beyond the local defensive perimeter. "Commander, reveal the vessel's primary drive configuration." The projection shifted. The dull gray hull seemed to shimmer under the enhanced sensor sweep. Suddenly, the external visual fidelity sharpened, peeling back layers of external plating that the hegemony sensors had previously dismissed as inert hull mass. What was revealed was not a collection of welded scrap, but an intricate, almost organic lattice of superconducting material woven beneath the surface armor. It pulsed with a faint, contained energy signature that the Veridian sensors had utterly failed to categorize. "What is this?" Thuron whispered, his composure dissolving. "It is consuming no detectable external energy source for motive force, yet it maintains positional lock against local gravitational fields far beyond standard maneuvering thrusters." Rostova's voice was steady, laced with quiet pride that resonated far more powerfully than any H. Hegemony display of grandeur. You analyzed the surface technology, sovereigns. You saw the crude exterior, the low-grade hull composites salvaged from dead systems, and you categorized the propulsion matrix as salvaged scrap. You failed to analyze the purpose of the scrap. She paused, letting the implications settle. The scrap was not the drive itself. The scrap was the housing. It was the necessary thermal and kinetic shielding for the true innovation. What you observe is a contained, self-sustaining zero-point energy tap, utilizing a locally generated field distortion to create a stable vacuum fluctuation cascade. It requires no refueling, generates zero waste heat detectable by standard Veridian sensors, and provides motive force sufficient to cross 3 galactic voids in a time frame previously considered theoretical. The silence that followed was absolute. To achieve true, sustainable ZPE extraction had been the theoretical holy grail of Veridian science for millennia, always foiled by the instability of the vacuum shear required for initiation. Impossible, Lyra hissed. The containment field alone would require the total output of a solar-class energy relay maintained in perfect symmetry. Not impossible, Jian Li corrected softly. Merely statistically unlikely until you apply the correct structural resonance. We did not build a zero-point tap, sovereigns. We learned how to utilize existing material decay patterns to naturally induce the necessary oscillation frequency. We took what you discarded, materials too structurally chaotic for your integrated systems, and used that inherent chaos to achieve what you sought through perfect order. We made the most dangerous, most efficient starship in the known galaxy out of the galaxy's trash. This was the human reveal. They did not progress by refining existing, known paths. They progressed by exploiting the overlooked failures of those paths. They weaponized entropy's residue. The council chambers recessed for 3 full rotational cycles. The delegates remained in stasis protocols while the high sovereigns retreated into their deep-level strategic nexus, a space shielded even from the atmospheric resonance of Xylo's prime. The philosophical implications were staggering. If the Veridian hegemony represented the zenith of ordered, elegant technology, humanity represented a paradigm shift, the mastery of applied disorder. Kalen convened the emergency session with the 5 ruling sovereigns. The atmosphere in the nexus was frigid, the air thick with raw, unfiltered processing power. "Air vessel," Kalen stated, his voice stripped of its usual diplomatic timbre, revealing the stark, cold intellect beneath the authority, "is not merely advanced. It negates fundamental tenets of our strategic calculations. If they can move across the void with such impunity, our defensive perimeters are obsolete. We based our security on the understanding that interstellar transit requires significant detectable energy expenditure. They operate outside that expenditure budget." Sovereign Thuron, recovering from the initial shock, projected a complex simulation showing the expected operational lifespan of the Dauntless based on preliminary readings. If their ZPE system functions as suggested, a self-sustaining reaction initiated by residual kinetic stress, the vessel possesses effectively limitless range and tactical stealth. It can remain dormant indefinitely, then engage at full power instantly, rendering all sensor nets useless. Lyra focused on the diplomatic angle. They have achieved strategic superiority through manufacturing efficiency, not necessarily through overwhelming intellectual capacity. They took what was broken and made it whole, utilizing processes we deemed too inefficient to even model. This suggests a deep, practical understanding of material physics divorced from abstract theory. Are they inherently more practical than we are? Practicality laced with alarming disregard for established safety protocols, Kalen countered. Their negotiation was a demonstration of force disguised as trade. They did not come seeking acceptance. They came demanding access to isotopes required for a project we do not yet comprehend, backed by a demonstration that renders our entire military posture irrelevant should they choose hostility. The core fear of the hegemony was loss of control. Humanity had introduced chaos into their tightly managed system. "We must understand the purpose of this structural lattice they seek to build," Kalen commanded. "Thorn, Rostova, and Lee remain under observation. We will permit the exchange, but we will demand full schematics of their intended application for the refined isotopes. This is non-negotiable." The meeting resumed. The human delegates were waiting precisely where they had been left, their stillness unsettling. Dr. Thorne acknowledged Kalen's renewed address. "Sovereigns, we anticipated your need for V. Aerification. We recognize that the concept of trading established capability for theoretical access requires a demonstration of intent. We are prepared to offer that demonstration now. Commander Rostova, initiate Protocol Sentinel Beta. Rostova gave a sharp, minimal nod. There was no verbal confirmation required. Suddenly, the primary holographic display of the council chamber flickered, overriding the Viridian projections. It was replaced by a real-time feed, not from the Dauntless, but from a remote sensor node placed by the humans deep within the uninhabited, high-radiation zone of the Orion Arm, a sector the hegemony rigorously avoided due to uncontrolled stellar flares. The feed displayed a vast, silent field of stellar debris, the remnants of a supernova perhaps 10,000 cycles prior, and within that field something was moving. It was not a ship. It was a structure of colossal, impossible geometry. Black, non-reflective angles intersecting at angles that defied Euclidean space, absorbing all light, radiating only a deep, crushing gravitational signature. It was immense, dwarfing the largest known hegemony orbital habitats, and it was unmistakably artificial. "What is that abyssal construct?" Kalen demanded, his synthetic voice momentarily cracking with genuine, cold dread. "That," Rostova stated, her helmet visor seemingly focusing on the image with intense concentration, "is what we designate as a void anchor. It is the signature of a species that existed long before the Viridian hegemony coalesced into political power. It is a weapon, or perhaps a monument, built using physics we are only beginning to replicate. It utilizes localized reality collapse for propulsion and defense." Minister Thuron frantically analyzed the energy bleed from the projection. "The gravitational variance, it is tearing the local spacetime fabric. It should not remain cohesive." "It remains cohesive because it was designed to operate within the parameters of localized reality collapse," Rostova corrected, her tone becoming philosophical heavier. "This construct is dormant, a remnant, but dormant threats are the most dangerous. The void anchor represents a technological ceiling that we, humanity, recognize as inherently hostile to stable biological life. It is a monument to an entropy-maximized philosophy." She stepped forward, placing one gloved hand on the cold surface of the negotiation table, a gesture of surprising intimacy with the environment. "Sovereigns, the isotopes we require are necessary for the construction of a counter-resonance shield, a protective layer designed to deflect the specific wave patterns generated when a void anchor attempts to initiate local reality shearing. We are not seeking to build weapons capable of defeating you. We are seeking to build defenses against something that can erase you, us, and everything we have ever built without effort." This was the second, deeper reveal. Humanity had not come to conquer or barter based on existing power structures. They had come because they perceived a danger so profound that it superseded all petty galactic politics, a danger that the hegemony, focused inward on its own perfection, had failed to even detect. "Your scanners, your millennia of observation," Rostova continued, her voice gaining an ethical resonance that cut through the hegemony's ingrained arrogance. "They are tuned to detect threats operating within the known parameters of energy propagation and mass displacement. You were looking for refined elegance, for predictable signatures. You never thought to look for the remnants of sheer, destructive power operating on completely different laws of physics, the kind of power that turns stars into dust without visible ignition." Kalen absorbed the data stream regarding the void anchor, cross-referencing it with ancient, discarded hegemony archaeological data, fragments concerning species driven to extinction by inexplicable gravitational anomalies. The pattern clicked into place. The hegemony had dismissed those anomalies as natural, chaotic stellar events. Humanity had identified them as evidence of technology. "You found this threat," Kalen said slowly, the realization dawning. "And you navigated to us in our most secure core systems, not to boast of your ZPE drive, but to secure the means to survive this external terror. Your arrival was not a challenge to our dominance, but a desperate attempt to ensure mutual survival." "It was a calculation of highest probability," Thorne affirmed. "To survive the anchor, we need the highest purity lattice structure achievable. To achieve that purity, we require your specialized refinement protocols. We offer the ability to travel anywhere without refueling, in exchange for the ability to survive the things that hide in the dark between galaxies." The political realignment was instantaneous and absolute. Arrogance collapsed under the weight of existential threat. The hegemony's P. Political maneuvering evaporated, replaced by the raw, unifying fear of extinction by an overwhelming, unknown external force. Kalin authorized the full data exchange regarding the stabilization of atomic lattices under high temporal shear, bypassing centuries of proprietary security classifications. It was an act of absolute trust, something Viridian civilization rarely permitted itself. Minister Thuron, now working alongside the human engineer Jian Li, experienced a profound shift in perspective. He watched Li interface with the hegemony's most advanced simulation matrices, not with complex proprietary code, but with surprisingly simple, elegant scripts that manipulated the flow controls with brutal efficiency. Your methodology for interface programming, Thuron projected to Li, his tone now one of collaborative respect. It seems overly reliant on direct hardware manipulation. Where is the layered abstraction, the fail-safes built into multiple computational tiers? Jian Li, his movements economical, pointed to the screen displaying the human code structures. Abstraction introduces latency, Minister, and latency is where the anchor's influence manifests. If we are trying to hold a lattice together against a force that fundamentally denies the existence of that lattice, every wasted clock cycle is a failure point. We do not trust the abstract layer to fight for us. We trust the raw interaction between the command and the physical process. Thuron understood. Viridian technology was designed for long-term stability, for slow, predictable expansion across known physical laws. Human technology, forged in the crucible of urgency and immediate threat, implied by their primitive starting state, was designed for immediate efficacy, regardless of structural elegance. They built things to work now under duress. So the ZPE drive, Thuron mused, looking back at the projection of the Dauntless. It is not an inherently superior drive. It is simply a drive that tolerates catastrophic near-failure better than our own designs. Precisely, Li confirmed. It is designed to function despite instability, while your drives require absolute stability to function at all. If the anchor's influence begins to degrade the fundamental constants in the immediate vicinity of your flagship, the energy matrix supporting the hull will ripple, the confinement fields will fluctuate, and the entire vessel will dissipate into plasma within microseconds. The Dauntless, however, might flicker for a second, and then continue on, because the underlying physical structure is designed to absorb that ripple as energy, not as destructive interference. This explained everything: the erratic energy signatures, the reliance on seemingly obsolete materials. They were not primitive, they were resilient by design, built for a universe that actively fought back on the quantum level. The diplomatic liaison, Dr. Thorne, paralleled this exchange in the primary chamber with Sovereign Kalin. We understand the political delicacy of this alliance, Sovereign, Thorne stated. We are aware that our presence disrupts the established hierarchy. We make no claim to leadership within the Concordat. Our ambition is survival, not dominion. We ask for the knowledge to refine the components necessary to shield ourselves, and in return we offer the Dauntless, not as a diplomatic gift, but as an active sentinel against the external threat. Kalin felt a slow wave of acceptance. The hegemony had always viewed other species through the lens of potential subjugation or utility. Humanity saw the universe through the lens of immediate, life-or-death engineering problems. This perspective, while unsettling, was undeniably effective against the magnitude of the threat they had uncovered. We accept the terms of exchange, Kalin decreed, his voice regaining its customary authority, now tempered with newfound caution. The refinement data will be transferred to your chief engineer immediately. Commander Rostova, the Dauntless will be granted full ingress to the controlled engineering sector for integration trials. We require assurance that the integration of our refinement methods will not compromise your existing ZPE containment. Rostova met Kalin's gaze, or where she perceived his focus to be. Sovereign, the modifications required are solely external to the containment core. We will integrate the new lattice structure around the existing ZPE containment field. Think of it as adding a secondary, more refined skin to an already robust foundation. We utilize the principles of your elegant science to perfect the defenses required by the brutality of the anchor. It was the perfect synthesis, human resilience wrapped in Viridian precision. The integration phase lasted for one standard Xylosian month. The Dauntless was moved into a vast, inert construction drydock within the hegemony's deepest orbital platform, a location usually reserved for the assemble. Why of planetary defense matrices? During this time, the alliance solidified into a working partnership. The Veridian engineers, initially condescending toward the simplicity of human materials science, began to recognize the almost elegant brutality of their designs. The humans, in turn, marveled at the precision of Veridian temporal processing, recognizing that the near-perfect energy flow was invaluable for creating the uniform crystalline structures required for the counter-resonance shielding. The true test came during the final activation sequence. The newly integrated lattice work, now a complex, interwoven tapestry of dull gray shielding and shimmering, perfectly aligned energy conduits, was brought online. The goal was not to power the ZPE drive, but to subject the new shielding to a simulation of the anchor's gravitational shearing forces. On the bridge of the Hegemony command vessel monitoring the trial, Sovereign Lyra watched the monitors with hawk-like intensity. If the Dauntless vaporized, it would represent not only the loss of a potentially invaluable defense asset, but the catastrophic failure of the Hegemony's first major strategic gamble in millennia. Initiate simulation cycle Alpha 9. Rostova ordered calmly from her position inside the Dauntless's modified command deck. The simulation initiated. Outside the dry dock, the Zalosian sensors registered localized spacetime distortion, a miniature controlled expression of the Void Anchor's signature power. The hull of the Dauntless did not merely resist, it responded. The ZPE housing, the scrap structure, began to subtly pulse, absorbing the sheer energy. The new, refined lattice caught the residual stress waves, not dampening them, but redirecting them through the ZPE field in a controlled feedback loop. The ship did not simply survive the simulation. It appeared to feed on the destructive force, momentarily causing its own energy readings to spike far beyond previous theoretical maximums before settling back into sustainable equilibrium. "Report," Lyra demanded, her projected image vibrating with tension. Jian Li's voice, laced with professional satisfaction, echoed through the Hegemony systems. "Simulation complete. Hull integrity at 100% efficiency. Lattice stabilization holding at peak simulated stress. Sovereign, the Dauntless has just weathered a stress event that, if applied to a standard Hegemony cruiser, would result in immediate structural dissociation across 4 spatial dimensions." Rostova stepped forward, addressing the entire observation structure, her voice carrying the weight of proven success. "Sovereigns, we have forged a singular defense. The Dauntless is no longer merely a vessel powered by salvage. It is now shielded by the convergence of our 2 philosophies. It is ready to serve as the vanguard against the existential threat we both now recognize." A wave of profound relief, mingled with a burgeoning sense of shared purpose, swept through the Hegemony observers. They had been saved, not by their own inherent superiority, but by the unexpected, pragmatic genius of the species they had initially dismissed as disorganized primitives. The alliance was formalized under the banner of the Concordat of Pragmatic Defense. The focus immediately shifted from diplomatic positioning to the identification and eradication of other potential void anchors scattered across the periphery of known space, regions the Hegemony had ignored because the energy signatures did not conform to known, controllable phenomena. The Dauntless, now refitted and designated the Sentinel-class Vanguard, proved its worth immediately. Navigating through regions of space previously deemed impassable due to unpredictable gravitational eddies, it pinpointed 3 more dormant anchors within the span of a single Hegemony strategic cycle. The process of neutralizing these relics was never direct combat. It involved deploying highly focused, Veridian-refined energy pulses to precisely counter the anchor's internal resonance, a process requiring the exact material purity the humans had sought. The Hegemony provided the precise pulse pattern, humanity provided the vessel, and the pilot capable of navigating the immediate destructive field to deploy it. During one such mission, deep within the volatile Maelstrom sector, Commander Rostova initiated the final sequence on the 3rd anchor. The ancient structure began to groan under the counter-frequency, its impossible angles momentarily shifting toward conventional geometry. As the anchor began its death throes, a silent implosion that consumed its immediate localized spacetime, Rostova noticed a tertiary energy emission emanating not from the anchor itself, but from the extreme periphery of the sensor field, far beyond where any known technological debris should exist. Hold, Rostova commanded the hegemony support vessels hovering safely outside the exclusion zone. Giant Aris look at. Sensor band Gamma 7. That is not residual discharge from the anchor. Jian Li, monitoring the energy diagnostics from the Dauntless, checked his readings. Commander, that signal is weak, extremely attenuated, but it's structured. It's not random noise. It's a transmission broadcast at a frequency that suggests intentional deep space penetration, billions of years of travel. Dr. Thorne moved to the primary communications array, overriding the standard hegemony filtering protocols which would have automatically dismissed such a weak, ancient signal. It's complex. It's information-dense. The encoding is based on universal constants, Kalen, but the structure, it's fractal. It's recursive on itself. The signal was painstakingly analyzed over the next several rotations, utilizing the combined computational power of the Sentinel Vanguard and the hegemony's primary nexus. The sheer volume of data was immense, representing an archive of staggering breadth. When the translation matrix finally stabilized, the core message resolved into a single, looping sequence of universal mathematical axioms, followed by a highly detailed schematic. Kalen, viewing the data directly from his command nexus, projected his concern to Rostova, who remained aboard the Dauntless. Commander, the schematics provided by this ancient signal, they detail the exact method for creating the void anchors. They are not random weapons, they are components of a system. Rostova stared at the schematic displayed on her internal monitor, the precise blueprint for localized reality collapse, the very technology that nearly annihilated them. They are not weapons, Sovereign. They are gates. They are navigational beacons. Dr. Thorne, his voice filled with awe and a dawning horror, confirmed the translation of the accompanying linguistic data, a sparse but potent record left by the civilization that built them. The transmission identifies the builders as the architects of First Light. They did not build the anchors to destroy. They built them to travel to the furthest reaches of the cosmos, utilizing controlled reality collapse as a means of instantaneous traversal between localized cosmic domains. The entire purpose of the void anchors, the existential dread they inspired in both species, was suddenly inverted. They were not existential threats. They were transportation hubs, relics of a bygone era of travel so advanced it manipulated the very fabric of causality. But if they are gates, Lyra queried, her projection sharp with sudden, renewed ambition, why were they dormant? Why did they only activate under the specific counter-frequency induced by our combined effort? This was the final, profound twist. Jian Li, analyzing the energy signature of the now-neutralized third anchor, pointed to a data anomaly that had been previously overlooked, dismissed as residual decay heat from the anchor's core. Sovereigns, the power source for the gate was not localized zero-point energy, like our ZPE tap. It was far more sophisticated. It required a stable, sustained energy matrix sourced from a specific type of localized biological reactor. A reactor that generates constant, low-level psychic resonance, tied to the evolutionary development of higher cognitive function. He paused, letting the revelation hang in the cold vacuum of the engineering bay. The architects of First Light did not use machine power to open their gates. They used life. Specifically, they utilized complex, self-aware biological sentience as the ignition key for their hyperdimensional travel system. The anchors did not simply destabilize reality. They required a compatible organic power source to initiate the dimensional shear. Kalen accessed the ancient historical archives concerning the mass extinctions that preceded the Viridian hegemony. The patterns suddenly shifted from random collapse to a chillingly deliberate harvesting. The species that built these anchors, Kalen whispered, the realization monumental, they did not perish. They merely relocated. They did not design these systems as weapons of mass destruction. They designed them as livestock feeders. Rostova, staring out into the deep, silent void where the anchor had just vanished, understood the terrifying implication of the signal they had intercepted. The architects built these gates across the galaxy, waiting for civilizations to reach a threshold of cognitive complexity sufficient to act as a viable power source. They cataloged and moved on, leaving behind the dormant machinery. We did not stumble upon a threat, Sovereigns. We stumbled upon their abandoned infrastructure. And the message they intercepted, the precise schematic for building more anchors, along with the operating frequencies, was not a warning left for a potential ally. The transmission, Thorne concluded, his voice barely a tremor, is an automatic beacon, rebroadcasting the operating instructions, attempting to draw the attention of any SB. SE's advanced enough to rebuild the necessary gates. It is not a distress call. It is a status update to the architects. Target Zone X Delta has reached optimal cognitive development. New gate activation protocols downloaded. Humanity and the Viridian hegemony, having just forged an alliance based on overcoming an unforeseen existential threat, realized they had not been defending themselves against ruins. They had been accidentally repairing the ancient farm equipment of their true, long-absent masters. The silence of the void outside the Dauntless was no longer a comforting sign of emptiness, but a terrifying testament to the patience of a cosmic predator who had just been alerted that the harvest was ripe. The greatest danger was not the technology they found, but the fact that their desperate, pragmatic alliance had now made them visible and ready for collection. The real war, they understood with chilling clarity, had not yet begun, and it was far larger than either species could have possibly imagined.